Fox News Podcast presents Brett Baer's All-Star Panel.
America's got to be in the lead if you want to deal with these threats. We're going to lead.
The mourning is over. The Shiva is done. And if you're a conservative, you should be optimistic.
You know, my main priority right now is making sure that it delivers for the American people.
We have to make our country great again, and I will do that.
I think the president gets criticized by people all the time for the stuff he says, by people who ignore what he does.
Now, Fox's chief political anchor, Brett Baer.
A historic night for former President Donald Trump winning a second term in the White House. Now President-elect Trump joins Grover Cleveland as the second president in history to be elected to non-consecutive terms. Fox News voter analysis highlighted his gains with key groups like black men, young voters, Hispanics, which helped him work his way through the blue wall, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, Republicans seized the Senate through the size of their majority, though the size of their majority remains unclear. To break down all the data from election night and the post-day, we bring in our panel. Anchor the Story, host of the Untold Story podcast, Martha MacCallum, host of the Ben Domenech podcast, and editor-at-large of The Spectator, Ben Domenech, and co-host of The Five, Harold Ford Jr. The voice is a little rocky today, Martha.
I was like, while you were talking, I went, I was like, I hope that didn't get picked up. I think it's been a really long night, but a fascinating night. And that's what makes what we do so interesting, right? And to be that, have a view and a front seat to watch all of that unfold last night was just phenomenal. I mean, you couldn't make it up. We went into it thinking that it was going to be razor tight. And I remember saying the day before, you know, it feels like this could roll really hard one way or the other, just based on everything that we were looking at. And boy, did it. And it's a huge victory, honestly, for Donald Trump.
And Ben, I do think, you know, it is a repudiation in several ways. One is, I think that the message was, you're not listening. You're not listening to us. We don't like the woke stuff. We really think the economy is really bad for us. We feel it at home. We don't like the immigration situation. And don't talk about all this other garbage. And it's a repudiation of the media. I mean, the bullhorn is gone. They are not listening to the fascist stuff.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that they leaned so hard into that in the closing weeks of this election is something that they're going to have to look back at and say, did we make a huge mistake here? It was interesting to see when we were looking at the initial numbers coming back, that democracy number of people who were concerned about it. And then seeing that underneath that number, there was a huge number of Republicans who were concerned about it, who were voting for him. In other words, they interpreted things like the lawfare attacks on him, the way the Department of Justice has gone after him, et cetera, as being something that was threatening to our democracy in its own way. And so I think that there was kind of this false sense on the part of Democrats that that was an issue that was only going to play in one direction for them. In addition to that, I think that they bet so hard on the abortion issue as being the animating issue for this cycle once again, as we saw in 22, where it snuck up on Republicans. They weren't anticipating it. But it turns out that actually voters, even pro-choice voters, can make decisions that are based on other issues as well. And they were concerned about the economy, about immigration, about security. And I think that those are all issues, big issues that fundamentally the voters were saying from the get-go that they cared about. And Kamala Harris never really got to connect with them on those points. She got drawn into these other battles, I think, that the media, many in the media, wanted her to fight, whether they were actually helping her or not.
Yeah, and you know, that Axios piece where it was the no content candidate who didn't have answers for about 15 different policy things, I think was really telling in the final days. Harold Ford Jr., just to lift the curtain, you and I both had communications and texts with the Harris campaign throughout and going into the night. It was this quiet confidence that they were really certain that their ground game was going to get them across the finish line. And they were active in the early part of the night trying to spin us on one thing or another, and then went deadly silent. I mean, just crickets chirping. And that was really telling at that point.
No, thanks for having me on. It was an odd 48 hours leading up to it because there was a lot of information coming out of the campaign, coming from the campaign through media channels, suggesting that they were very pleased with where they were and the numbers. There was some polling data that we've referenced, all of us have over the last few days, that reinforce some of their thinking, or at least sought to reinforce some of their thinking. But I agree with Ben, and I agree with Martha. This is, and the way you open it, Brett. This is a moment for Democrats and Republicans alike. I think two takeaways for me. One is that the traditional Democratic Party, the Obama, the Clinton, who really formed the basis and the pillars of our party, and even the pillars of the traditional Republican Party, that those organisms in our party are kind of dormant, if not dead now. There's going to have to be a reimagination and reinvention of the Democratic Party. And I would even argue somewhat the Republican Party, but President Trump has really forged ahead on that front. I think at a larger level, Brett, I think it's a time for Democrats to accept this outcome and understand that we've got to listen to people, to be able to understand the loss, if we're going to develop solutions or forge ahead with solutions to the economic and cultural and national security anxieties and aspirations of people, of the country. That is, I mean, we've got to, just as an example, just more serious and sustainable answers to education shortcomings. I listened to Kellyanne last night on the show talk about school choice, and school choice. She's not the only one that raises it, but she raised it last night, and it comes up a lot on during campaign time, but really no party addresses it in any real sustainable way.
It will now.
I mean, as a Democratic Party, this is something, if we want the people whom have voted for Donald Trump twice now to elect him, if we want to bring back the coalition that's helped the Democratic Party, Hispanics and blacks and women and young voters, we're going to have to compete for them in a very, very different way. And I know it's people say we've got to be more moderate. She didn't pick the right vice presidential candidate. She didn't have enough time. All those things may be right. But at a fundamental level, there's something wrong. And we are kidding ourselves, fooling ourselves, and shortchanging the objectives of our party if we don't sit and seriously think about this and think about it from the standpoint of how we go forward.
Panel, we'll hold it right there. Martha, I'm all for the unity message. I'm all for reaching across. I'm all for, burying the hatchet, that sort of thing. However, by not calling to concede, by waiting until whatever it's going to be, 4 p.m. today to deliver a speech, for the party that was really up in arms about the possibility that Donald Trump was going to say he won the election when he really didn't win the election first, I just think it's misguided and not a good look.
I mean, imagine what the discussion would be like today if the shoe was on the other foot. If we were sitting here right now and President Trump had not conceded yet, it would be holy hell pandemonium. He's not going to do it. He's never going to do it. So, and obviously the classiest, best move for the country and for her would have been for her to come out when it was very clear last night that there was not a path, and to talk about her journey over the last 100 days and to talk about what it has been like to travel around the country and to see the heart of America and the honor that it is to be that and to be the vice president of the United States and to say, quite honestly, I'm sorry I wasn't able to pull us across the finish line. That people understand that. And I think it would do her so much good to have made that statement last night. Rip the Band-Aid off. Then that way you wake up in the morning, whatever you want to do. Stay in bed all day, but it would be done. And so it's unfortunate. But, we'll get it this afternoon.
I think we may have seen the last of Kamala Harris as a political candidate.
I think it's very possible, Brett, which is kind of amazing. I mean, it's one of these things where she was being hailed, as recently as 2-3 months ago as being this force for change and
the next Obama,
this incredible, and it's amazing how much after that first date things get worse with Kamala Harris, and that's something that I think is the American people have now experienced that twice. It's hard to see her getting another chance from her party to do that again. But one thing I would put in perspective is it's not all on her. I mean, so many decisions were made by the Democratic Party around her that put her in a position that I think was very difficult. And I think in particular, her difficulty in navigating how she was dealing with the Biden presidency and the negative aspects of it was something that she never really figured out. I feel like if she had had more time, perhaps she could have done that. If she had gone through a traditional process, she could have done that. She might have been able to win, a primary that she was contending for going back a year ago. But that didn't happen. And because of that, she got forced into the main job without having earned that support and gone through the ringer the way that you do in a primary process. And look, ultimately, this is an indictment, I think, of anybody trying to use this approach in the future. People have to win primaries. It doesn't matter if it's short. It doesn't matter if it's an abbreviated process, but you have to win it in order to get there.
It just gets you better. You have to answer questions. You eventually get better. Sometimes
She should have done her interview with you 6 months earlier, and then she can recover from the interview if it goes badly, as opposed to doing it when she did.
Yeah.
So, guys, I differ just slightly. And then I hear what been saying, and I don't necessarily disagree, but I differ from the standpoint that when you're the vice president, one of your, if not main jobs and responsibilities, is to be ready to serve as president. And I hear everybody. I don't buy the argument as much as people are suggesting on my side that it was a short campaign, and she was thrust into it. I mean, if we could all be so blessed to be thrust into something like that, then you rise to the occasion. This was a campaign that didn't meet the moment, and it's unclear to me if they'd had 6 more months. I do agree with you that if there was a primary process, even an abbreviated process, we might have gotten a better sense of, might have gotten a better candidate. And I think her real challenge, and where I agree with you wholeheartedly, is she didn't know, or for some reason couldn't figure out, with all the polling data showing demonstrably that people did not want 4 more years of Joe Biden and Bidenomics, no matter how great he had been. And I respect him and I admire his service journey, as I've said publicly repeatedly. But people didn't want that anymore. And for some reason, that campaign decided to pursue a campaign strategy where that was still the very heart of that strategy. So it's, they shouldn't be that surprised, but their strategy was Trump is just terrible. Trump is bad. How could you want Trump anymore? And that was my original point, that there's something the country, he's very appealing to. I mean, this coalition he put together, this was not by accident. Something is happening in the country. So I'm not sure if she had several more months, if she'd have figured that out or not.
But don't you think, Harold, that it's a little disappointing to hear today that people are so, on the left, are so disappointed that Americans are losing democracy, that they are racist and sexist, and clearly
I think it is. I think it's asinine. I think it's. I wish you'd asked me another question. I think she should have called him last night. I agree with you and Martha and Ben. I don't know how you don't make that call last night. I mean, the one thing, when you're a candidate for public office, you're not bigger than the office. I never ran for anything more than the U.S. Senate and happened to blessed to serve in the Congress for 5 terms.
And you almost won, but you made the call.
It was a painful call, but you make the call. Because you're not bigger than the office, and you're certainly not bigger than the most important office in all of politics in the Western world. So anyway, I don't understand that. And I think some of my party who are saying they can't understand democracy. I mean, all those great quotes you have in your piece about unity from those who were defeated and those who won, they all should read that. I mean, they all wanted Trump to do that if he'd lost. Too many people. It would be different. Well, it wouldn't be different if he didn't have the coalition that he had. But the coalition that he built for this win is a stunning, remarkable, surprising coalition. So that to me is the story.
Can I just say, political stars are extraordinary and rare. Mm-hmm. Okay, Trump is an extraordinarily rare political, muscular superstar. Flaws, we all have them, but what's different with him, and what never was going to change, I don't believe, with Kamala Harris, no matter how much she talked about growing up in the middle class or understanding your hopes and aspirations, people didn't feel it. They didn't believe that she knew who they were. And, look at Bill Clinton, look at Barack Obama, look at Ronald Reagan. These are people who get it, who have that authenticity. And so, you can we talk always, obviously, and we analyze these things about building coalitions, but people were drawn to him, and they had 4 years off, right? And during the 4 years, they went, oh, it was COVID. It was a terrible time in American history. Everyone was depressed and working from home. And Joe seemed like, a comfortable way to get through the next 4 years. No harm, no foul. It's going to be fine. Didn't turn out that way. And now they have decided clearly that they want someone who exhibits strength, fearlessness, which we saw in spades over the course of this election period. And that's what resonates. It's what connects. I don't know that it's that much more complicated than that.
I think that one more point, Harold, I agree with a lot of what you just said there. I would just say there was kind of a bad fortune aspect of this too, just in the sense that not everybody gets to be Nick Foles. Not everybody gets to just sweep in and have a great team that you can suddenly take over at just the right moment to make something amazing happen. And I think that in this case, we never will know if Kamala Harris could have built perhaps something that was different. But as it stands, to your point about the coalition, this coalition is amazing, and it's broad, and it's not just about him. It's astounding to me to see that Ted Cruz lost Hispanic voters in Texas by 29 points the last time he ran for the Senate. He won them by 6 points this time. We see that district that hasn't gone for a Republican since 1896. And yet it did. We see Hispanic voters, not just Cubans, but Hispanics broadly coming into the Republican coalition, and we see their appeal to black men. They won 1 out of every 5 self-identified LGBT voters. I mean, this is an incredible coalition that Trump built, and I think the big challenge for Republicans is going to be, can he hold on to it? And for Democrats, it's going to be, how do we find the ways to break that coalition open and appeal to them again and bring them back onto our side?
A couple of housekeeping things. I mean, there's still this Manhattan case that goes to sentencing technically November 26th. We'll see if that moves forward. There are calls for President Biden to pardon Donald Trump and to put pressure on the Manhattan judge to move things along and to kind of go by the wayside. There's an appeals court that looked like in the arguments that it was heading towards either wiping it out or diminishing it significantly. The civil case that brought by the Attorney General. You think all those things should happen or will happen, Harold?
I don't know. I think some of it should. I mean, I would give a lot of consideration if I were advising President Biden, or if I were President Biden, to doing what you just said. And I think Governors Hochul and Kemp may have, at least my reading of it, may have an opportunity to participate here as well.
I think Hochul more than Kemp. I think Kemp there's a legislature element to that down there.
Those are okay. I know that I thought the New York thing might be cleaner, but I think anybody that has the ability to do something on that front should do it. And that's not a popular position in my party, but I'm an American. We got to move forward here. And I don't think, if you're thinking about it from a party standpoint about how we heal, rehabilitate, reinvigorate, you need to move on. And if you're thinking about it from the country standpoint, it's time to move on.
It's really an opportunity for Biden when you think about it.
Legacy-wise.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
his legacy is in very rough shape right now. But if he were to come forward and say,
for the good of the country.
There are lessons in this election, and for the good of the country, I'm going to pardon Donald Trump. That honestly, I think it would be the best possible thing that he could do for his party and for his own legacy.
Totally agree. We heard from the former president early in the morning after we got off the air. He was exuberant and excited. I was surprised that he's heard from so many world leaders. And I wouldn't be surprised, Ben, if we are looking at something in the world stage that a lot of things start to happen. As he gets into being president, I wouldn't be surprised if a Saudi normalization deal starts coming together, if other things start to materialize, much like Reagan taking over from Carter.
I think you're completely right about that. I think there's been a lot of stuff that's been kind of held back a bit, seeing how things were going to play out, and now that he's going to be returning, I think that a lot of these things, these dominoes, will start to fall. But look, we shouldn't be as ebullient as Republicans are. We shouldn't, have any naivete about the challenges that are in front of him. He got elected for a lot of reasons, and for a lot of reasons that have to do with the failure of the Biden administration in regards to domestic and foreign policy. But the challenges that are there are not just going to vanish overnight. And as much as he can promise things like, the Ukraine war never would have happened, certain things never would have happened if I was in office, and he could be correct about that. Now he has to deal with the ramifications of them as they are, and extracting, ourselves from various entanglements that the Biden administration has had in ways that don't end up diminishing American strength overseas, and that confront things as they are, particularly as it relates to the connection between Russia and China that we've seen form in the last couple of years is going to be hugely important.
There's one thing that
see if if there's any sort of hostage deal like we saw with Reagan when he came into office post Jimmy Carter. That would be a moment I think all those families would greatly welcome.
There is this confidence that he's been there before, so he knows the roadmap a lot better. The transition team will be prepared. I kind of thought that maybe we'd hear, I really do like this Project 2025. They've got some good ideas in there. Harold.
Harold's not laughing.
He's not laughing. He's not laughing at all.
No, I do think...
No, I was on mute, Brett. No. I think he did mention that, and I got to tell you, the conversation that I was fortunate to be on with you last night with him, he didn't have you and Martha. He didn't have it was not an arrogance to the tone. It was not I know what to do, and I'm not going to listen to anybody. I mean, he had a tone, and his demeanor last night was. I got to tell you, I was surprised by it, pleasantly surprised by it. So I think, to your point, I think there might be some opportunities to hopefully do the thing that Martha mentioned. And Ben, you're right. Everybody's got to be really serious and sober about the challenges that we face. I heard the president say a lot during the campaign, this would not have happened if I were president. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ben. I think you may have said something along the lines, but I'll say that I don't think that is the case with all of these things. But he certainly knows a lot more and a lot better than he did 8 years ago. So I'm wishing him the best in all of these pursuits.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. It was a lot of history. Now for a bit more history. November 6, 1984, Ronald Reagan was elected to a second term, defeating Democrat Walter Mondale, former U.S. vice president under Jimmy Carter. Reagan won 49 states en route to acquiring a record 525 electoral votes to Mondale's 13, one of the biggest landslides in U.S. history. Many conservative and liberal scholars have agreed that President Reagan was one of the most influential presidents since Roosevelt, leaving his imprint on American politics, diplomacy, culture, and economics through the effective communication of his conservative agenda and pragmatic compromising. That'll do it for this week. You can hear more of this series at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. Make sure to leave a rating and a review. We want to hear from you. For Martha, Harold, and Ben, I'm Brett Baer. We'll see you next time. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.